Welcome into another bonus episode here at Hockey Inside Out. The Montreal Canadiens going to the final 14 games will look like a different roster come next fall. So, gentlemen, who do you think will not be back with this team come October 5th?
Well, I can't see Jonathan Drouin being back in Montreal. I think his stint with the Canadiens will come to an end. I had a conversation with Jonathan after a recent game in the locker room, and I was asking him, in a perfect world, do you want to come back to the Canadiens? And he said, yeah, I do. He loves playing for Marty St. Louis. But I think for Jonathan and for the Canadiens, it's best that they just move on. I mean, it's been a tough time here in Montreal with Jonathan. The year they went to the Stanley Cup final when he left the team with anxiety and sleep issues, and he's lived in a really bright spotlight since he's been here. It'll be interesting to see, though, what other teams might want him, because I think if Kent Hughes had been offered basically anything much at the trade deadline, they would have moved Jonathan. They didn't. So I don't know what the future holds for him. He has said he wants to keep playing, but I don't think it's going to be in Montreal. And the other guy who's going to be gone, Paul Byron, who's hasn't played at all this season. A lot of people may have already forgotten about him. It looks like his career is probably over, but it's interesting that he's been watching games in the management box as opposed to sitting with the injured players in the press box, which leads me to believe there might be a position for Paul Byron moving forward in the Canadiens management team. And I think that would be a really smart move. He's one of the classiest guys I've ever been around, really well respected, loves living in Montreal, one of the few guys who lives here year round. I think if they could add him to their management team in some position, I think that would be a good move. And the other guy you got to wonder about is Sean Monahan. I don't know if at this point, I'm wondering if he's ever going to play again. Like, this injury is just, if he doesn't come back and play before the end of the season, like, who's going to take a risk on this guy to sign him? I mean, the best I think you can think of is maybe like a 1-year contract for close to NHL minimum, just with his injury history. So at this point, I'd be surprised if he's back in Montreal also. But those are the three guys that I'd be surprised to be back next season.
I mean, aside from the UFAs, I think there's still some guys who have a high chance of being moved. Like we talk about Sean Monahan being moved on, but if Owen Beck is ready for the NHL next season, I would not be surprised to see Christian Dvorak moved out. They may not get what they want for him, but it's been 2 seasons now, and my lasting impression of Christian Dvorak is he's there, which is harsh, but that's pretty much all we've gotten to see from Christian Dvorak over 2 seasons. There hasn't been much to talk about, and I think there's a really decent chance that Joel Edmondson gets traded around the draft. The Canadiens have, I believe, 9 defensemen, NHL defensemen, signed next year. They don't want to be in a situation where they're sitting guys like Jack and Harris to play another veteran. They've got Matheson and Savard there to be the veteran presence. Chris Weidman can continue to do what he did this year, which is, get scratched a lot, come in when necessary, and never complain. Always be a good teammate. He's been perfect at that. But I don't think Joel Edmondson wants to sit on the sidelines, and I don't think the Canadiens necessarily need to play him next year with the big steps forward that their young people are taking. And, just based on how they've played this year, if you want to ice a slightly more competitive team, I don't think you're icing Joel Edmondson over a guy like Kovacevic anymore. He just isn't as good.
I mean, Stu touched on it. Drouin, for me, I think his time is up. He's not the type of guy that I see part of the Montreal Canadiens organization, so he will be moved along somewhere other than Montreal. Weidman, who's just kind of a player that is there in the event of injury. I don't foresee him being back with the depth that they're going to have at the blue line, and then there's this guy named Armia. Even though he has some time left on his contract, I don't look at him as the type of personality that they like to have on their team to fit that position. And I'm sure they're going to try and do something. Unfortunately, they're probably going to have to eat some salary, but they're trying to make a statement here that they want to have everybody on board pulling the same way. And that type of player is not the kind of guy that's pulling the same way as everybody else.
Yeah, Rick, I think you'd volunteer to drive Armia to the airport. But,
No
that
problem.
that contract is going to be hard to move. That's especially this.
I'll wait for the call and for the nice tip that he would give me, because he can afford it.
I think that contract's going to be hard to move, though. But Andrew, you're right. I mean, if Joel Edmondson had been healthy at the trade deadline, he would have been traded. He wasn't, and one of the keys for the Canadiens the rest of the season is if Joel Edmondson can stay healthy and play right through the end of the season. And I think you're right. I think they will move him during the offseason. I don't know if they'd still get a first round pick for him just with his chronic back issues. But you're right. They have other younger guys, and you still got Matheson, you got David Savard, two really good veterans that I think you want to keep around this team. But with all the young defensemen, I don't think you need three veterans anymore. And as mentioned, Weidman's a guy that he knew what he was getting when he signed his 2-year deal. You can make him a healthy scratch for 50 games. He'll never complain. He'll be a good guy in the room. Players love him. Teammates love him. He's that seventh defenseman that just you can play when he's been playing through an injury this year also. Like so many other guys. But yeah, Edmondson, I can see him being moved during the offseason, either at the draft or before free agency.
So quickly here, guys, do you suspect that this will be a busy offseason for Kent Hughes to get off of, say, a Mike Hoffman or maybe Edmondson or others that might be going to a final year of their deal moving towards a new season?
I think every offseason is going to be busy for him for a long stretch here. I think the most important thing is going to be getting Caulfield signed long term, but the nice thing about Hughes' situation is he's not actually in a big rush to move off guys like Armia and Hoffman. I think Hoffman especially has rehabilitated his career a lot this year. I know he doesn't have great scoring numbers, but for the first year in like 10, he's not a liability defensively. He's still not a great guy to have on the first wave of the power play. He fumbles the puck a lot, but overall, he's actually improved his game quite significantly under Marty St. Louis. So I think teams will watch that and say, like, hey, if this guy can actually rediscover some of his scoring touch on a good power play and not be a defensive liability like he has been his whole career, he's worth something, right? It may not be a lot, but he's worth something. He's worth a try. But you might have to wait until the last year of his contract. And UL Armia, I think he's still got some work to do before he's a marketable asset.
I mean, postseason meeting, management meeting, and coaches meeting all of their depth personnel, if you will be looked at and, decided which guys they like to have as part of the hockey club and others that don't fit the mix. And, Ken Hughes is pretty well aware of what he'd like to have consistent with his group versus guys that he doesn't like to have. So there are going to be a number of names. You talk about changes. They're going to have lots of discussions on their depth and position. And if this phone starts ringing for one of those guys that they're not totally in love with, I'm sure he'll find a way to make it work and get a different location for the guys that don't fit the mix.
Yeah, Hughes doesn't have to rush to do anything if he's not getting what he thinks the good value is for a player he's going to move. I mean, there might have been offers for Edmondson before the trade deadline, and they weren't what he thought they were worth. There might have been offers for Josh Anderson that he didn't think were worth. He doesn't have to be in a rush to do anything, but it's also going to be interesting to see what he does or doesn't do in the free agent market this summer. As you mentioned, I just got to get Cole Caulfield signed first to see what kind of money he's got left over and what he's working with. But it's interesting to see if he's ready to jump into the free agent market a little bit now, or if he's going to wait another year or another 2 years before he goes that route.
Well, it will be a fascinating offseason for the Montreal Canadiens, as Andrew made the point before. Could they get Connor Bedard? If they do, that kind of solves a lot of ills with this franchise moving forward. But again, we'll see what they do with the depth players if they do move off of certain guys before training camp in mid-September. Well, don't forget to submit your questions and comments here at Hockey Inside Out. We look forward to conversing about that on a future episode. And check out the episodes on YouTube on Hockey Inside Out. And submit or sign up for the newsletter, beg your pardon, at MontrealGazette.com/newsletters. And check out the bonus content and full episodes for Hockey Inside Out as well. On behalf of Andrew, Stu, and Rick, wish you a great week. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.